All right, welcome back to the channel. I have something fairly short to share with you, but it's about myths that technicians believe at times. With that, we're going to look at a case study. I developed training for professionals as my full-time job, and part of that is to go out to shops and assist with diagnostics and such. And so I have some local techs that when they're stuck on something, they give me a call. I show up, I say, give me the keys, go away, go make money, and I'll take care of your problem. So that's kind of what happened here. The technician had a 2007 GMC Denali with a 6.2. And the complaint is you drive at 20 miles, it goes down the road, and then you come to a stop and boom, it dies and it won't start. It'll crank, but not start for about 10 minutes. He gave me some additional information. He said he took it out and did it himself and found that when this happened, he put a fuel gauge on the rail and it had about 60 PSI in it. And also he had spark from the ignition coils. So in his mind, he's ruled out fuel and spark. And so I thought, okay, that's interesting. He also went out and did something for me. He went out and got some data. So he sent his helper out with a scan tool, and he drove the vehicle till it died, and then he made a recording of the data stream, and he sent that to me. And that gives me something to, before I leave to go help him, it gives me something to think about. And so you can look at it too, like I did. Down below in the description, there's a link to a scan share file. And this is what he sent me, this is what I looked at. And so this is an interactive web page. You could change the PID. There's 4 PIDs shown, but there's more. You could look at different PIDs. You can move a cursor. You can zoom in and out. And so I looked at this and I knew what I was looking for, or I had a common idea what I was looking for. And given his previous testing, I was thinking that maybe what I needed to do was look at the injector amperage, because there's a ground for the injectors that is different than the ground for the ignition coils, and it's kind of a common problem. So I showed up at the shop, I took my amp probe out, I went to the fuses. There's 2 fuses that feed all the ignition coils and injectors, and so I connected to those 2 circuits with my amp probe, and I drove the truck. So I drove it for 20 miles, it came to a stop, and at first it didn't want to take off. It's like, it kind of fell on its face, and then it took off, and then it went around the corner, and it died. So here I am by the side of the road. It's about 2:30 in the afternoon. It's 105 degrees, but it's California, so it's a dry heat, and so it's going to be awesome. So anyway, so I'm there, and it's cranky, and it won't start. And I noticed that I have good current flow through my injectors, and I have good current flow through my coil primaries. So it's got to be something other than that. So I had a pressure transducer with me, so I hooked it up to the fuel rail, and I'm seeing about 55, 60 PSI pressure, somewhere in there. Now, this engine will run on much lower pressure. And those of you who have done fuel injection services know what I'm talking about. Typically, as we're flushing the injectors, we might set the pressure to about 25 PSI. So they'll run on low pressure. This thing should start on 60 PSI pressure. Now, I know I'm looking down this line of reasoning because of what I saw in that data capture. It went lean and it died. So I hooked up my pressure transducer, I keyed up, and first thing I noticed is it took 600 milliseconds to build pressure up. That's too long. Now, that's too long. It doesn't mean it's broken and not going to run, but it just, okay, that's like an indicator saying, hey, look here, there's something going on here. So I didn't like that. And then I noticed ripples in the pressure, and that shouldn't be happening either. The engine's not running. I just keyed up. And so then I'm thinking about this, and so I went over to the transducer and I hit the bleed. So the engine's off, the pump's off. I hit the bleed on the pressure transducer, and Out comes the fuel, as you would think, and then out comes something along with the fuel. And you can see it right there. So from that, I'm thinking, okay, I know what's going on here, but I'm thinking the guy's going to want something a little more substantial to show his customer, because this car has been at the shop for a while now. And so this is going to be a pretty pricey repair, so he wants some extra stuff. So I don't have a clear drain tube on my pressure transducer. That's one of the things I got to add to my box of tricks when I go out on these calls. So I called the tech up and I said, look, I'm down the street. Grab your mechanical fuel pressure gauge, because I know you have a long bleed, clear bleed hose on it. So bring it on over and let's do something. So he came over, we hooked up to the fuel rail, and I pulled the fuel pump relay out and I jumpered it. So now the pump's on all the time. The engine's not running, but the pump's on all the time. And, you know, you can see here, look at those hoses and look what's in the hose. It should be just fuel dumping out. And we have fuel and we have a whole bunch of air. Now there's two places that air can come from, or two scenarios where you can get air in there. And so I'm not sure, I won't know which one it was. I kind of have my suspicions, but he's going to sell the job and pull the tank, and I'll know more then. But so the myth, the thing that started this is I was told before that if you had pressure, if you were supposed to have 60 psi pressure in the rail, and you have 60 psi pressure in the rail, that means you have fuel and you don't have to worry about it. That means there's no bubbles because they'll compress and all that stuff. And the truth is, that's not true. You can have serious aeration of the fuel, and it can either be a performance issue, falling on its face, running lean, or in this case, this stupid thing wouldn't even start until it cooled down. Now the heat, this is summertime, it's hot as I mentioned. Yesterday it was 109, which is awesome because my pool temperature is like near 100, and that's good. But it's not so good for being by the side of the road working on a truck. This is not common, and so that's why I'm pointing this out. In my 43 or so years as a drivability, electrical / whatnot tech, I've have tens and tens and tens of thousands of actual repair diagnosis and repairs on this kind of stuff, and I've only seen a handful of these issues. It happens, but it's kind of rare. But you kind of need to know not to believe the old myth. And so with that, I hope you enjoyed this. You may notice that I didn't go into detail about analyzing the data, and that's because this is aimed more at professionals who should be able to analyze the data, but unfortunately many times are not. This is, while a do-it-yourselfer might get something out of this, it's really, I'm not covering a lot of stuff because that's not what I'm here for. On that note, there's a lot of training on YouTube. Be careful who you listen to. There's some good guys, and then there's some guys who really should just stop and go learn a few things, get some experience under the belt, and then decide they want to be a YouTube star. So I don't care to be a YouTube star. I'm too old. This is just fun. So every now and then I do it, and I don't do it real well, as you can see, and that's okay. It's too much work to do really fancy stuff, and I save that for my full-time job, which pays the bills. Anyway, with that, hope you enjoyed this. If you did, please give me a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed, go ahead and subscribe. I'll try to put out more videos later. I've been grounded with this COVID thing. I typically travel a pretty good deal as I teach, and we'll watch some of our trainers teach. And that's when I'm, at the hotels, eating too much pizza and doing other things. And so that will eventually return. And so hopefully we'll have some interesting stories. All right. Thanks for watching.